So the birth of the child, metaphorically speaking, would be Christ's second coming. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts saying, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou not hurt the oil and the wine. Do you remember what Klaus Schwab said about COVID-19 versus a comprehensive cyber attack? Hey guys, I want your opinion this time. Instead of perma-crisis, as you're going to see in the video, what's a better term biblically for us to use when you've got the 4th horseman of the apocalypse symbolizing war and famine and plague and a lot more crises coming our way? What should we call this? Perma-crisis is Dictionary's word of the year in truly awful 2022. It's like one crisis after the other, and they're intensifying like a crescendo unto what? Well, we know unto the birth of that child. Like Jesus said, the end times are like birth pangs. So the birth of the child, metaphorically speaking, would be Christ's second coming. But they don't see a conclusion. They don't see an eventuality here that ends in resolution. They see just permanent crisis. What a hopeless life. Praise God for the blessed hope of Jesus Christ. Now, when we think of COVID, that was a pretty big crisis, right? Well, we talked in Technocracy about the coming crisis. We've been helping warn about this for some time. And if you remember, if those of you have watched Technocracy, do you remember what Klaus Schwab said about COVID-19 versus a comprehensive cyber attack? He said, this will make COVID-19 look like a minor disturbance. Is that what that felt like? A minor disturbance? It was a big deal, but a comprehensive cyber attack. A grid-down scenario, an incident that will bring to our knees society's normal patterns of flow of transportation and food and energy. I don't want to paint the picture just for the sake of like a Hollywood movie. There actually is a Hollywood movie with its exact script that just came out, and another one talking about 2025, lest I get ahead of myself. Realize that even the world recognizes these things. So it's not a prophetic, fanatical, alarmist thing to do to say, man, almost like perma-crisis. They're going further than we are because we say, well, it's a crisis for a period of time, but then Christ returns. You know, the 3 of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse really typify this crescendo very well. You get the first horseman, he's wearing white, the white horse rather, and wearing a crown. This is positive imagery. These are positive symbols of the conquest of God's message and movement of a royal and light-bearing and white and pure character. But by the time you get to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th horseman, you start getting this proverbial concept that people speak of, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and people think of that as cataclysmic types of destructive events. And indeed, the 2nd horse, it says he's given the power to take peace from the earth, and that he has a great sword, and people will kill one another. This is Revelation 6, verse 4. So this is war in a nutshell. Jesus called it wars and rumors of war. And then a 3rd horse comes out, and it is black, and he has scales in his hand, or balances. And in verse 6, it says, and I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts saying, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou not hurt the oil and the wine. This is measuring the cost of food being so high in a time of, what does this symbolize? Famine. This symbolizes scarcity. And then the 4th horse comes out. Now what's interesting about this is it's a pale horse, as pale as death. And his name is called Death, and hell follows with him. And this is verse 8 of chapter 6 of Revelation. It says, power was given unto him over the 4th part of the earth to kill with the sword and with hunger. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? We saw in the 2nd and the 3rd horse, we saw war, or the sword, and we saw famine. And now the 3rd horse repeats those, sword and famine, and with death. Now the word death there is the Greek word thanatos, and that's the same word when the Old Testament was translated into Greek. That's the same word that is used to describe a plague. So most modern translations will render that in chapter 6, verse 8 as plague. So did you catch the 3 now? Let's review. Sword, famine, and plague, or war, famine, and plague. Now, plague, that could be like COVID-19, or maybe even bigger ones that are coming, as we'll see in a moment. But war, sword, famine, and pestilences, how some translations render it. Sword, famine, and death is how others translate it. The modern translations actually get that one, that disease, plague, pestilence concept in the 3rd element of that 4th horse.